We are now going to move on to a very tough topic that most of us have dealt with at some point in our life, sex and intimacy with HS. So, dive all over it. So I want to introduce Erin Martinez. She works in Michigan next to Dave Louie. And I'll let her kind of explain a little bit more about herself and what she does. And then she's going to walk us through some help with sex and intimacy and commonly asked questions about all that. And then she'll also be available during the small group sessions later too. So perfect. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thanks. So glad to be here. Brinley, would you be able to give me the ability to share some stuff on the screen?
Yes. Oops. Uh-oh, hold on one second.
No worries.
Is that you or is that me?
That's you.
How do I get it back to being big? Okay, is anyone more there we go. Okay. Participants, hold on, I gotta make you host.
There's
Okay.
also okay. There we go. Okay,
You're in
thank you
charge
so
now.
much.
To be trusted.
Yep,
Okay.
this is
Okay.
perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. So thank you for having me. And I'd like to also say a special thank you to Brinley for all the amazing work you have done in putting this together, and also your kindness and compassion and flexibility in allowing me to be remote. I am so grateful that even though I can't be together and there with you, that I'm all able to be at least there with you in some way. I actually have, I'm a caregiver right now. And so the lack of predictability is really, really difficult for travel. And I saw the picture of the pool and I felt really, really sad that I was not there in person, as well as I think it's always better when I can be in person. But I hope that the information today that I'm sharing is still helpful. I would love to see people in the more intimate breakout groups for conversation, or if we want to go the direction of trying a couple activities, we can do that too. But just immense gratitude I have for being able to make this possible in this way, and for your ongoing kindness, Brinley. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So I am based here in Detroit, Michigan, and I am a certified sex therapist and a clinical social worker. So I work most often in the space between trauma, which is really broad, right? Relational trauma, medical trauma, um, collective and historical trauma, as well as sex and how that impacts our sexual expression, our sexual identity, and also our sexual healing. So I wanted, as I thought about the presentation today, I also thought a lot about the role that all of you play, not only in your own healing journey, but then sharing that information with others. And I think it's really, really complicated, because what we find helps us to heal is often really different for another person. And we're always in different phases of that, right? So I'm also dealing with some different chronic health conditions. And so I find that it's so interesting when I'm working with clients and they might be in a space of less pain and more celebration or more exploration. And sometimes I realize that I try to be very aware of it, but sometimes there's a little bit of jealousy for me. If I'm in just a high fatigue or high pain day, I think like, I want to be where they are. And so I thought about that. I don't know if that's a familiar feeling for all of you in talking and sharing kind of tips and ideas, but I think of that as pretty normal reaction, right? And part of our journey as advocates and healers in the work each of you are doing as well. So I hope that these ideas are flexible and useful for your own lives, and I hope they're also useful in how you share and the process of your sharing with others. This isn't a trigger warning. I also teach in the School of Social Work, and they always want trigger warnings quite a bit for content. So this is not a trigger warning. This is a image warning because my 20-year-old son decided I needed help decorating my slides just last night, and I'm not real sure that I'm comfortable. But we'll see. Y'all can give me feedback afterwards. So I'm not sure if people are familiar with this term, intimate justice. It was actually coined by a researcher at the University of Michigan in the programs of gender study and psychology. And it was made a little tiny bit viral by Peggy Orenstein, who's a researcher and author. And she talks about this idea that there seems to be a difference between the entitlement to engage in sexual behavior versus the entitlement to enjoy it. And I find that that is something that can be really, really distracting with the people I work with, and also the friends I have, and I think sometimes even in my own life, that to be intimate or to be sexual often feels like a responsibility. It feels like something that maybe we're supposed to do or we're taught we're supposed to like. And there's a very big shift we need to make to think about our right to actually enjoy and look forward to and be hopeful about what we're going to experience in intimacy. And I think that if we begin to grapple with where am I on the trajectory of being able to believe that's my right and that's why I'm entering in, we're going to evaluate how we approach this much differently, whether we're talking about solo or partnered experiences. So I just want you to take a moment in your own head and heart and think about, I don't know, you might reach back to yesterday or 2 days ago, and you might reach back a decade. But I want you to think about a moment in your life where you were considering whether to have a sexually intimate moment, right? So not doing it, but considering it. And I want you to think about, did it come with a sense of, I should want it? Or did it come with a hopefulness of what you were going to get out of it? An excitement or an energy, or even that feeling of, like relief, or even like, oh, I think it'll make me feel better, better in my own skin or better about myself. But was there something in it for you that you were looking forward to? Or is there more of a sense of I should or responsibility when you think about that moment? And then if I can just ask you to kind of hold on to that as we navigate through some of the other material, and we'll loop back to it. I forget to mention, because I can't see you all, but I am appreciative and would love any interruptions. If people have questions, just give it to me in live time, okay? So when I work as a sex therapist, I usually have some folks coming in with specific difficulties or specific goals. When I work as a sex educator, I need to kind of broaden out and think about how I can make the sort of basic tools of the work, how I can provide them for you. And then we can begin to think about how you dish that out in your own life. So I think a cornerstone of sex therapy work is about moving away from the idea of performance to an idea of pleasure. In doing that, we're going to need to move away from ideas that we were taught about what sex should be. So a lot of us in the room were probably taught that sex should be penetrative, that it should be accompanying an orgasm, at least for somebody involved. We saw images probably of what we should look like when we are enjoying sex and what our bodies should look like in the sexual experience. And then there's also things about our bodies like how wet they should be and how erect they should be. And of course, they shouldn't have any scars, right? Like, and there shouldn't be any discomfort, and we shouldn't need to stop. So we could all go on, right? We could make a huge list, ceiling to floor, of all the rules we were taught of how we perform. And I find that people really cannot have the intimate sexual experiences they want unless they're able to let go of some of this. Now, the how of letting go is like a muscle, right? That we have to train the sexual pleasure muscle and kind of loosen the grip of the sexual performance. So one of the ways that I find I do that in my own life is I might just kind of notice that let's say I'm having kind of a higher fatigue day. So I'll use the example of lupus. I have lupus, and so I have some moments that I have pretty intense fatigue and a lot of achiness. And when I think about sex or intimacy of some form, right? Because sex can mean all different things for all different people. I might think, well, if I'm not able to bend the way I want, it's not going to be very sexy. And then I need to catch myself, right? Because that's a performance idea. It's an idea about somebody needs to do it a certain way or look a certain way in order to be what I guess we would say sexually successful. And so when I catch myself and I notice that, I just kind of self-correct, right? No, let's put an image in my head of what might be pleasurable for me. Most of the time, I would say 98% of the time, when I talk to partners of my clients, they're already in the pleasure space. They're already super excited. What's the hottest thing they can think about of their partner? Their partner enjoying themselves, their partner excited about how they're being touched or receiving touch. But that's not always how it's perceived, right? On the other end, their partner is often saying, no, I think that my partner likes this or they want that. And so there's a lack of communication sometimes, but there's also these assumptions we make. So this muscle that I'm kind of loosening, and I'm loosening the performance one, I don't want to build that up, and I'm strengthening the sexual pleasure muscle. So I might just imagine myself thinking, well, kind of a high fatigue day. So there's certain maybe positions I don't want to be in with my body. And I'm going to imagine maybe something really soft on me. Like I'm kind of imagining the smell of the candle, how soft the lotion's gonna be on my arms, because that's something that's not achy right now. And maybe even I'm picturing sort of like closing my eyes and the noise that I'll make as I'm enjoying that touch. And that's a pleasure muscle. So now I picture that. So hopefully I'm sort of like breaking down one idea of how we begin to create what we would call a new neural pathway. We do this work for ourselves. Like certainly you could beef up the work in therapy, but I think this is the most important thing to do in real time with ourselves. So we kind of got to catch ourselves when we have a performance mindset and refocus ourselves into a visualization of a sexual pleasure mindset. And I'm just going to pause for a moment and ask if people have anything. Is the point making it? Do people need more information? Is it clear? Anything people want to add?
Anybody questions? No, I think we're good.
We're good? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so this was one of the images that my son decided to add, and I think that he liked it because this little guy is just sort of enjoying some touch here. I think he's like a chicken, I guess. So I think another thing to think about if you are with a partner or thinking about beginning a relationship, it's important to break down these ideas of the type of touch as options, menu options. And I think we want to use these menu options of touch in our communication with our partners, our communication with ourselves, and also kind of on a scale with our discomfort in our bodies, or maybe positively focus where we do have comfort, where things are feeling okay, maybe. So again, I'm using myself. If I'm having, on a 10-point scale, let's say my achiness is and fatigue is at an 8. I'm most likely, because that usually causes me to have sort of a sexual, the excitement part of my brain, the sexual excitement part of my brain breaks. There's like a break because I'm like, I don't want to be adventurous. I don't want to do something new. I want to do something that brings me comfort. And so I'm going to probably, when my pain or discomfort is higher, I'm going to find myself in more of an affectionate touch or more of a sensual touch. And so a few things that does, one, it validates me. I'm not going to push myself into something that doesn't feel good for my body. It also opens up other opportunities, because if I know what I'm not feeling like I should do, I can then focus on what are my other options. And this is really key if you're in a dating relationship, you're beginning one, or you're in more of a long-term partnership. Think about how often somebody approaches you and says, can we do this? Do you want to do this? I'm in the mood for this. And we will often just say no. No, pain's too high. My body's not feeling it. Nope. I equate it often to food. So for those of you that are parents, I feel like it's relatable when the people in our family say, I'm hungry. I hate that statement, I'm hungry, because right away it's the work of like, now we have to start bringing out issues, ideas about like, what do we want to eat? What are you in the mood for? And it's usually like I feel like as a parent, the kiddos are always coming to us, right? Like, I'm hungry, like, I don't like that. I like it when I'm hungry and I'm in the mood for, right? I can do that. And if you say, I'm in the mood for nachos, I'm able to say, I'm not feeling the nachos. But what I could do is I could see myself getting a burrito, right? Like I could definitely get down with that. And I think intimacy can be that way when I'm able to say, I don't think I want this type of adventurous, like what I would probably contain in the erotic area, right? Adventurous, the part of my mind that kind of lights up when I'm thinking of a sexually erotic experience. No, I'm going to go more towards the comfort. And there's a whole lot that I can think about in those areas. If I'm thinking about affectionate, I think I want to go to our cuddle spot, and I might really want some sort of soft touching, and maybe I kind of want to get into my most comfy fun PJs, but I want to cuddle up close to my partner. And maybe I want some little nibbles on my neck, right? Some sensual experiences. And I can offer that, right? Like, I can't do this today, but here's what I would love to do. Are you feeling in the mood for that? So, another thing that is a good activity to think about is what type of affectionate and sensual touch do you enjoy? Because you want to beef up those activities. So when you're saying no to one thing, you can have suggestions for the other things. Just checking my time. Okay. The other thing I think is really important to respect about others and ourselves is there's a lot of different reasons we choose to be intimate. So there's an article called 238 Reasons and Counting. And this was done by, it was done on a college campus, I believe. And they asked people, why do you have sex? And within a very short time, a list was built that was 238 reasons. And we could go on if we kept on asking people. People, if we open up our heads to the idea that there is not a one right reason, and that people do this for a lot of different reasons, and depending on our mood and how our body's feeling, we're going to approach it for different reasons. Sometimes it's to keep the peace, and sometimes it's for a release, and sometimes it's because I want to feel differently about myself. And sometimes I just want to calm down, right? Thinking about that also really helps us begin to brainstorm what we want to do, how we want to communicate that, and how we want to align with someone else if we are partnering these activities. I think it's also really, really useful to notice if you tend to do it mostly for the same reason, and see if you're willing to spread into some other areas. We get kind of locked in a certain dance sometimes where we think, well, there's just certain parts of my body I'm going to use, and there's certain ways I'm going to use them. And when we're dealing with chronic health issues, it limits us substantially when we think there's only certain reasons and there's only certain ways. Most people, their biggest chance at having a great orgasm is in their mind and not in their genitals. So when we expand our reasons for why we want to be intimate, we might move into, if you find yourself usually being in a place of, I like to do it for release, or I like to do it to feel connected, do you think you'd be able to explore doing it for adventure, or doing it for to kind of unlock something new, right? Maybe you want to pull into more of a kinky space. maybe you want to learn more about your part that feels a bit dominant and not as submissive. If we're able to open ourselves up to consider how we might want to do that differently, I think it allows us also to learn about how we want to use our bodies differently. Any questions?
Yeah, so I feel like, and again, this is mostly my experience, but I don't know anyone else realize that it looks like, let me come over with the, when you. So my question is that when you have a chronic illness, right, and you're in intimate spaces, and I think maybe not so much when you're in a long-term relationship, but maybe in the dating phase or with more casual encounters, I feel like sometimes you have to control so much of that narrative, like, you know, when, where, how, the lights are on, the positions, because of like what you're hiding essentially. So for me, for example, like I felt like by default I had to be dominant or like be, you know, in a sense like control, have like, there was so much sense of control, which I think was detrimental to enjoying it versus like finding them later in life, or like submission was actually like the new dynamic for me. And like, do you feel like that's something with people with chronic illness, and especially something that affects you physically, that a lot of us in this, do you see that? Like, I don't know, I know that was my experience, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant point, because that opposite piece, right? Because you're highlighting you have to be dominant in the planning and navigating, like, okay, these are all the pieces I got to make sure that work right, and I got to communicate about such and such. And there's all the other spaces and domains of your life that you have to also be dominant and be planning ahead in medical spaces with family, right? Like, and so what you probably, most of the time, our erotic templates want us, not most of the time, not all the time, but they offer us a release to be able to take on a very different role or position in the intimate space. It's why people get very confused by their sexual fantasies, because they're like, I don't really like that. Like, I don't really want that to happen in real life. Why does it turn me on so much? And it turns you on because the erotic is a break from the all the time. And so I think that being able to say, oh, I am kind of into the submissive makes so much sense. And I do hear that in stories of individuals with chronic health issues. So I think that's a really fabulous point.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think that people with HS, there's a linkage, a connection between your libido as far as decrease or increased libido. Is there a linkage with that?
Yeah, well, and there is a linkage with that, and there is a linkage also more broadly with pain experiences and libido, but then it also kind of can get fuzzy if you were looking at like what's the root of the decrease in libido, because we're also thinking about medication, we're also thinking about lowered self-esteem, we're also thinking about experiences of depression. All those things are going to tank libido. So yes, and broadly it connects to other elements of chronic health. We also want to think about, I think some of these ideas are, if we believe that we have a right to pleasure, and if we believe that it actually helps our health to have sexual pleasure in our life, which is a true statement.
Orgasm like anti-inflammatory essentially, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or release, right? It's like lower than.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Woo!
Yeah, it is good for us, like chemically in our mind, and it's also good. That rush that happens with orgasm does help to, I almost think it as like a cleaning out of the stress hormones too. So if we're thinking of it that way, then we're really going to say, instead of no, okay, I need this, so how do I incorporate it? And I think that's when people begin to adventure out of the space that they're usually in and think about new ways that they want to experience eroticism. I think that, I know that we are better at being able to be our best sexual selves when we figure out ourselves first. And I don't think that that's a one and done type of thing. I think it's ongoing. Sorry for all Brinley kind of gave me permission to share a little like personal more than I do usually. So I hope that's okay with folks. I feel like you did, Brinley. I think you.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Okay. So I was just received I felt like they gave me a gold star when they said you're postmenopausal. I was like, thank you, because that was some hard ass work to get postmenopausal. I'm not sure where anyone is in that storyline, but that was some hard work. And nobody tells us, because they don't like to talk about the sexual stuff, they don't tell us about how to change with that. So who I was at 30 and having periods and all the hormones that go with that is completely different in terms of how I'm a sexual person now. And so this is ongoing work. It travels with our illness. It travels with our relationship with our body. I can definitely say for me that now I think I have enough life experience that I'm going to go get what I believe I have a right to. And I'm less interested in how people want me to be or want me to appear. And that feels like a way more exciting place to be as a sexual person than I was when I was in my 20s, right? Like I didn't have that yet. So we need to recognize ourselves as sexual beings, that we have a right to that, that is good for us to have in our lives. We have to have ways that we explore our own sexuality and how it is changing and what it is influenced by. And that might be that we read erotica, or we watch sexy movies, or we enjoy watching porn, or we treat ourselves to a new toy. Or we talk to friends about things that we want to try. Or we learn, somebody just told me yesterday, I finally learned how to sexy talk and I'm so excited, right? And like all I've been doing is sexting people for the last 48 hours because I feel like I'm finally good at it, right? Like, and this was like a 60-year-old and I was like, oh, God, all right, that's amazing. But you need a chance to figure out, how do I explore this? And you need to make some room. I'm shocked at how many people don't have a lock on a door or a place to keep their sexy stuff, or a time period in their life. They just kind of like, oh, if I had like a buck for every time I've heard people say like, I'm too tired to masturbate. Yeah, the end of the day is really tiring. So let's not do that then, right? Let's carve a space in our life that we get to think about these things. Music, I think, is so important, right? It gets you kind of hyped up in a different way. You need space to even have that playing to influence that. You need the smells around you. You need to put that in your life, and you need it to connect to other elements of who you are, right? So I always think about when I go out, if I was going to go out with my partner, and I don't really think that my partner has any expectations I would wear high heels. And I can't wear the high heels I used to wear, right? Postmenopausal, getting older, throws the back out. But I do love big clunky heels. In fact, I have some. Those are cute.
Can I ask
Are
you
they
a question?
great? Um, so that's a connection. If I'm walking through my day, that makes me feel good, right? It makes me feel a certain way about myself. And that doesn't have to be what I'm doing later. It just needs to be kind of like throughout our lives.
Can I,
Um,
sorry, to
yeah,
that
go
point
ahead.
really quick, sorry, because I know you just can't, you can't see us. What, I think a lot for the younger people, because in this room, I'm one of the elders, like, I feel like, I know when I was younger, especially when I was a teenager in my early twenties with HS, like, I felt like I didn't explore my own body, because there was kind of this disconnect where you just associate, especially
Yeah.
because of when it affects like your genitals, your groin area. And so I didn't learn until later in life the importance of like knowing my own body and like self-pleasure. And so like, how would you encourage young people to start that? Like, again, even in their twenties, which is a time when like, I mean, you were just saying earlier, like, we don't know shit when we're that young. I mean, no offense, guys. You guys are super like, I'm so proud of the new generation. Y'all are super woke and it's great. But like, I'm an eighties baby. Like, no one told us to do this stuff. No one told us it was important.
She swears she could go to Dubai.
Anyways, so I feel like how would you, for someone who has HS that's flaring a lot in their, on their labia, or even for gentlemen in their area, like, how would you approach coming, like, finding pleasure from an area that has so much pain?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I really appreciate it. So if we go back, like when we're thinking about that kind of shutdown emotion that I was talking about, where it's like you approach yourself or somebody approaches you and they're like, oh, do you feel like, and it's just like this hard no because there's pain in your life. If there's that hard no, what I would say to young people, or I think there's an overlap too, because I hear this also when I'm working with my trans-identified young people. They will often feel just this like an overwhelm or a fear of parts of their body where they're just like, there's so much going on there. So what I always say is like, let's move somewhere else for a while, right? Like, let's think about a different area. So, I love to talk to people about their other erogenous zones and starting there. So I like to talk to people about, for instance, I wonder what you would feel about using your nipples and exploring those more and sort of leaning into what kind of touch you like there. Some people like nipple clamps and some people like lotion and kind of a different type of motion there. I'm wondering if you would be willing to explore that on your own a little. And I'll usually set people up with like helping them think about the mood in the room, and what they're going to fantasize about, but also teaching them about different ways of stimulating their nipples. If, let's say, the labia is your place where you're feeling the most pain, but I might say, how are you feeling and how much pain is happening in your butt? And would you be willing to play a little with that, maybe just in the shower? I think also, I don't ever push kink on people, but I do encourage people to think about it, right? So even young people, and I agree with your statement that like the babies of the 80s didn't have the information, but the young people now, like, hats off. So many are accessing information that's so tremendous. But I hear from a lot of young people talking about like, I'm really into, or my partner's really into choking, or I want to try bondage. And I think the cool thing about a lot of those activities, done consensually, done safely, do lead you to different experiences of orgasm and pleasure. And it doesn't need to involve your areas that you're feeling the most pain in or shame.
And I know Shannon has a question, but just into the kink thing, one of the things which I find that like is interesting about that dynamic or that world is that the conversations around consent, because there's so much better communication around sex
Yeah.
in that space that you feel so much more comfortable going in because you're gonna communicate exactly about your condition, what hurts, what doesn't before you start. So I find that's interesting, that was kind of like a pleasant, like, oh snap. That's such an upside to this, which I don't think we talk about a lot. Like Shannon really has a question.
Hi, I'm Shannon.
Hi,
So
Shannon.
I used to struggle with the imagination of what I look like from behind during the action. And I wanted to know, like, what is a good way to practice confidence in that position? Like, should a person be in the mirror and recording themselves to see how they look, just to see that it's not that bad from what we might imagine? Or like, how do we get past that part?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I would
And if
call,
it is that bad, how do we move past it?
yeah.
For real right now.
I think the first thing we need to think about is, okay, so there's two things coming up for me as you say that. The one is that bad, right? Like you have an idea in your head of what that bad is. And I really want to challenge you to be aware that that is different than the person who may be looking in at that view, right? So first of all, you have to separate the messages you've received or given yourself about your body and separate that from how somebody else may perceive it, because you're never going to be able to be open to their excitement for your body if you don't allow yourself that separation. And I would say if you're doing what we would call in the mental health field exposure therapy, which that is like the idea of the video, I think that's exciting. I like that idea, but you might want to work up to it a little, right? You might even just want to get yourself in the position and begin to picture something about yourself that you like. So for instance, I don't know if you have something sexy, like I'm thinking about belly chains or thongs or things like that, right? Like I would picture that and allow yourself just to get in that motion and let yourself just feel that and visualize it before you start recording it. And if you are going to do the recording part, which I love that idea, but you're going to have to stop it when you watch it. So you watch just a little, you notice the feelings coming up for you, and you're going to go back to this thing we talked about where I didn't have a good image of it, but we're going to have to do that muscle thing of release and the muscle thing of building up. And you're going to have to put in some new messages in your head about what is sexy to unload the things you're holding about I am not sexy. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Okay.
My name is Jaya, by the way. Sorry for the intensity. That was real intense. My bad. So question, and this is just for like my supporters that's here on my live and just for all of you. When it comes to intimacy, do you feel like a lot of people should feel the need to disclose that they have HS before starting and initiating sexual, things? Because the only reason I'm saying that is because a lot of people feel like they get insecure to have sex because they feel like people may look at it as an STD or may look at things. So should we disclose those things before intercourse and tell them what it is, or should we just get on into it? Because a lot of people get so insecure that their body do clench up in the moment because they're afraid, or the way the person may look at them from the back, or they don't feel comfortable sexually because they feel like they didn't tell the person, or do they need to? How do we engage in sexual activity as a person with HS? Like, how do we do it? Between the folds of our skin, between the groin area, the buttocks. I would love to know, like, what's the best way to start performances with someone and, get more confident? And do we need to disclose that every time?
Okay, so I love the question. Brinley, can I have an extra 5 or no? Okay. So I I think that is not a hard and fast. That's a personal decision as to when. The thing I hear most often from individuals with HS is it's gonna make me feel better to tell them before I'm totally naked. If that is you, then do that. But it's not about what that other person needs or deserves. It's what you need and deserve. That's how you decide when to tell them. Okay. When's it going to feel best for you? Also, I think that when we're thinking about communication and negotiation, we get all kind of tense and tight and thinking about, oh gosh, what are they going to think? What are they going to see? Are they going to think it's dirty? All the things that you've had to worry about so much. And we go right to that. We go right to the bad. So you have something you don't want to talk about, but embed that in the things you do want to talk about. So this is taken from some work by Midori. Midori is a sex educator that is brilliant, and she uses this in the context of healthy, sexy negotiation. And she puts in her information about genital herpes here. Okay. That's important to note because it feels different to walk in and you're talking about what you want to do, and the first thing you share is, so I wanted to let you know I have genital herpes, and do you want to get sexy, and do you like anal sex? That doesn't feel as fun to me. I don't want to talk about it like that. What I do want to do is I want to start with the feeling in the moment. So I want to talk about with this new person that I'm dating and I'm thinking that we should start fooling around, right? And I might want to talk about first what I feel like doing in a sexual experience. So my pain's minimal today. So I'm thinking, I would love it. What I would think would be really, really exciting and sexy for me is I would love, maybe I'm partnering with someone with a penis. So I would love to give you a really great blowjob. I hope I'm allowed to say that, Brinley. I just did. And they give you a really hot blowjob. And then I'm kind of into this, like, a little bit of pain. And I'm wondering if you're into that. So I'm kind of describing, right? And I'm describing this, it lets me own it. It lets me get excited about the things. And what are you into? Tell me what you would like to do this first time we're together. And how will I know you're into it? And here's how you'll know I'm into it, right? So these are signals. These are things I do with my body. Just to let you know, I'm a noisy girl, right? Like, so I moan a lot or I move a lot when I'm really excited. And here's how you need to know when I'm kind of getting done. Why are we telling people about expectations and getting done before we're even in it? It's so when they're noticing these things and we're noticing those things about them, they give us some information. And some of that is when sometimes I start to feel a lot of pain in my body. And so that's where I'm going to totally course correct and I'm going to move to focus more on you. How do you feel about that? Okay. And I also want to let you know that I have some health concerns. You'll actually notice them when we're getting sexy. So I do have HS, and right now you're going to notice that when I have some scarring. And it looks to some people, they can get overwhelmed with it. What you need to know is it's not contagious. I'm going to help you navigate it so that when you're touching me, it doesn't cause me pain. And again, go back to listening to like my noises and how I'm moving my body, because that's going to be your best guide. Here's what I don't want to do when we're together. I don't want you to touch me directly on this place in my body because it has a lot of pain. And here's what I want us to do afterwards. So that was a really long answer, but what I'm suggesting is HS goes here. Give yourself the opportunity to describe yourself as sexy. Describe yourself as an expert of your pleasure and what you want to do. Learn what this other person likes and what they want to do. And then tell them the needs of your body, just like you would if you do have an STI. If you do have safety concerns that you need to think about, that's where that goes, is my take.
I have one question, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's maybe more of a comment, so I feel like, I don't know if I'm the only one here, but I've always been very comfortable being nude. I go to nude spas, I go to swingers parties, I do all of that. And I'm very comfortable sexually and love sex and love being single and everything. For me, what I do usually is I tell everything beforehand. I say, this is me, I have scars, don't touch here, touch there, let's go. And that has always worked. I've never had any issues with my HS and being sexual, being intimate with someone. No questions, I just lay that on there. I'm saying, are we going, are we not going? Because if we're not going, I'm gonna find someone else that I'm gonna go with. That's it. So I kind of like, there's two approaches to this. Like you can either like be hesitant and you feel really insecure about your body and your scarring and all, or you can be like, this is me, I'm sexy, I want to, you know? So are we going for it or not? Do you want to fuck or not? Because I'm ready.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love that.